Lake Mungo tree in Australia is the oldest Pleistocene anatomically modern human from whom DNA has been recovered. These fossils, mtDNA, belonged to a lineage that only survives as a segment inserted into a certain chromosome of the nuclear genome, which is now widespread among human populations. That is not only Australia, that is globally. So the modern human mtDNA was found back in Lake Mungo from the Pleistocene, and this implies that the deepest known proven mtDNA from an anatomically modern human occurred in Australia, not Africa, Australia. And Australia is far away from Africa. So this is Australia, and this is Lake Mungo. So let's say it's in this southeastern eastern tip of Australia. It's not in Tasmania, it's in the southeastern tip of Australia. During the Ice Age, we're talking about the Ice Age, it was connected with Tasmania and it was connected with Papua New Guinea. And it was almost connected to Eurasia, to all of Eurasia. This is a very narrow strip. In fact, this is not the strip. The strip is between these islands that are still here today. So they were certainly there during the Ice Age when the sea level, the ocean level, was much lower. So, in fact, the tip of Australia is the tip of Eurasia. I'm looking for a map with the currents because people, historians, forget that it's about currents. They know we've spread around the world and that currents are the fastest way to spread around the world. So, so this is a map of the currents. And here's Australia. And in fact, it was more or less connected. If you would come from South America with this current, and there is no other current, if you would come from South America or even North America, there's only this current. So if someone would come from the Americas to Eurasia, that in a way includes Indonesia and Australia, in the Ice Ages, and if you would go back 85 million years ago, it would even include New Zealand. So you would have a very big Eurasian continent, and you would have this continent. It would in fact be separated here. And if someone would come from either of these pieces or from the Americas, there's only this current, there's only this current, there's only this current. So you can only go to Eurasia, including Australia, Indonesia, and you would first arrive somewhere here, Papua New Guinea, which is part of Sahul, sorry. Okay, so in fact, you would arrive here. You would arrive here in Mungo Lake. So we know the oldest mtDNA, proven mtDNA, is found in Australia. Here, more or less. And we know that during the Ice Ages, this was more or less one massive Eurasia. So the first empty DNA did not come out of Africa. It came out of Australia. And it was near impossible from Africa to get to Australia because you would have to cross this sea that was always there. It was narrow, I suppose, at its narrowest 80 kilometers. I'm not sure. But anyhow, if you would try to cross it or cross it from overland with boats, you would be carried away and you wouldn't get into Australia. If you would get this way, you would get in this current and you for sure, almost for sure, would be killed and you would get to the Americans if you would get anywhere. You could also get to Africa if you would survive. So consensus tells us that mitochondrial Eve, so the oldest mitochondrial, comes from Africa. But that's not true because it is proven to be from Australia and it's not empty DNA L. It is a modern day empty DNA that is not empty DNA L. Besides, empty DNA L, the supposed mitochondrial DNA, was carried hundreds of thousands of years before mitochondrial Eve. Mitochondrial Eve means nothing else than the oldest mitochondrial DNA of modern humans. Not of Neanderthals, of modern humans. Eve is supposed to be related to humans and not to Neanderthals or Homo erectus. It's related to modern humans. So mitochondrial Eve is the oldest one. So there's evidence in Australian fossils that the oldest mitochondrial DNA, so mitochondrial Eve, is Australian. It could come from somewhere else, and that is in fact what we think. And that from somewhere else is in line with the currents, with the gyres, because it is those that carry everything that floats on the oceans. Going against them is very improbable. In the past and even today, no adventurer, rower or sailor will try to cross the Pacific or even the Atlantic against the currents. That is improbable. That is, let's say, that is a possible suicide. You don't do that. And those that tried didn't succeed. They didn't necessarily died, but they didn't succeed. So mitochondrial Eve, for now, is Australian. If it does come from somewhere else, it comes across along currents and gyres, and that would be from the Americas. And that is what all scientific markers tell us all along, but nobody is looking at them because they are inconvenient, because they disprove consensus and they disprove everything that is told. And that is sad. That is very sad. That what is told to all those that are interested is unscientific, is untrue. That is sad. Okay, so, and let's suppose it was empty DNA L. That is what consensus claim to be the proof for out of Africa. Even if it were, and it isn't, even if it were, it was carried by Neanderthals hundreds of thousands of years before before mitochondrial Eve of 200,000 years ago, or around 200,000 years ago. That would involve itself in and out of Africa 50,000 years ago. But it's untrue. It is not mitochondrial Eve. Mitochondrial L is not mitochondrial Eve. Mitochondrial Eve is not in sub-Saharan Africa. It is amongst all modern humans, except sub-Saharan Africans. And so, where do Neanderthals come from? Well, they certainly don't come from sub-Saharan Africa. Certainly not, because sub-Saharan Africa has the lowest frequencies of Neanderthal DNA in the world. It is absent in sub-Saharan Africa. And Northern Africa is alien to Africa. It's not alien, it's not extraterrestrials. It's not from sub-Saharan Africa. That is in other videos. North Africa was in fact a barrier between sub-Saharan Africa and the rest of the world. So even if the sub-Saharan Africans would have wanted to go migrate out of Africa, they wouldn't be able to migrate out of Africa because they would been held back by what is not sub-Saharan Africa. In fact, Northern African, which is not Northern Africa, it comes from somewhere else. That's why I call it alien, not from other planets. It's from other places than Africa. They admixed it as they with sub-Saharan Africa. So sub-Saharan Africans are not so pure anymore, so to speak. They are admixtured with DNA, with humans that are not from sub-Saharan Africa. So instead of out of Africa, it is pretty much the other way around. Anyhow, that doesn't matter because the Australian mitochondrial DNA has been proven to be mitochondrial Eve. That is for now.